Welcome to Look at It This Way. Today we are here with the consultant to the stars and the star consultant, uh, the masseuse with the most. Let's see what else we could say. Uh, just a really sweet artist and friend. Um, again, I'm really lucky to be interviewing people who've been in my life for over a decade now, and seen their artistic journey change through performance, through writings, through vocal work. Um, this is somebody who really is uh, someone to admire and look up to, and hopefully we could get a lot of beautiful insight. Sean, hi.
That was a really generous introduction.
I don't lie.
That was really sweet. Thank you. I was really taken back by that.
Yeah, and I try not to write them down and just feel how I feel with the person in the moment. And so that's how I feel about you.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you. I'm flattered. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. So I wanted to start, you do a lot of tarot. Um, if we could get a card pulled for this interview and see if maybe that'll give us a direction to start.
Okay. I'm gonna like move my fingers across the cards here, and you're gonna tell me when to stop.
Gotcha. Stop.
That was really clear. Thank you. And my finger was like really clear on it as well.
Nice.
It is the Nine of Wands.
Okay. And tell us about the Nine of Wands.
One's is fire. So it's like drive or like expression, creativity, libido, like things that like energies that like drive us and move us in the world. And the nine in tarot is like it's the penultimate. It's like this burgeoning or like sort of like increasing energy. And so like the nine of wands is talks about it's like taking a break. It's like needing to kind of step out of the battlefield for a moment. Usually
Mm,
the person, you can kind of tell with her, they're depicted as kind of like beaten up and like a little like shell shocked.
mm,
And they're kind of standing inside the little cove of these nine wands. So it's like it's not over yet. And you're fighting for something you believe in, or you're doing this for a reason, but you need to kind of like step back, like
right.
take a moment.
Yeah. Um, well, if that's where the cards are taking us, one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to talk to you about in your work was about um, the words I wrote down were like transparency versus visibility. And I don't think I mean vulnerability necessarily, but the idea of as a performer, you play with the idea of like being translucent or like how hidden or how forward your physical presence is, what you're revealing and not revealing seems to always kind of be in your hands and always you're always kind of conscious of where those things fall. Um, I'm thinking of well, a couple of the room is a body, the one with the like headpiece. Uh, I think about like your music where you may be physically in the space, but the thing that's holding the attention is the voice. Um, could you maybe speak to those themes a little bit, or if any of that sounds like something you want to respond to?
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear that perspective on it. I think how I'm perceiving that is dimensionality, like the thing the thing that I'm doing, or I really think a lot of art is doing, is creating some sort of attention around the layers of something.
Mhm.
Um, bar like maybe minimalist, or even actually not with minimalist art. I think yeah, interested in like creating awareness or like highlighting consciousness.
Mm,
I think in performative venues, it's really interesting, especially dance venues, because if someone's coming to see a dance show, I feel like there is so much expectation in whatever way. If it's a dance person, they maybe subconsciously are prepared for a certain rhythm or a certain like way that the dance is presented. And if it's someone that isn't sort of a dance person, I think there's these expectations of I'm not going to understand this or I'm not interested in this or like like there's not a way into it. Um,
mhm,
and that when I sort of observed that and realized that, that's when I became interested in playing with those expectations.
mhm,
And like for the solo This Room is a Body that I did, I knew that I wanted to have like dance forward sort of advertising of it. And then for the
mm,
first like 20 to 30 minutes, I wanted it to be just me talking, to kind of push back against that expectation. And it built into some dancing eventually, but I liked that idea of this like psychological sort of push or push back against an expectation. Um, and so, yeah, back to your question, I think, yeah, creating dimensionality and kind of decentering the performing body
mhm.
strategically, throughout, so that the attention or the consciousness or the awareness hopefully is kind of opened up to be experiencing on different levels or different layers, different
Right.
dimensions. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I look at what you're up to now, thinking about um even something like the divination practices for sure, but also like I think you're interacting with different like dimensions, right? So you have like massage, which is very tactical, like or very tactile, very um on the body where the body is the subject and like centralized versus a practice where something like um what's the work where the dancer dances and the person observes it? Um
Dave or Public Arcana?
Public Arcana. Something like Public Arcana where the body is moving, but it is still not like the subject. It is like decentralized and just a part of um a bigger kind of picture. So I think like you're working with um you're engaging on these different kinds of dimensions. So I'm curious if you could talk about your massage practice maybe a little bit. Uh, one of the, I think maybe more tactile forms that you're still like engaged um, in a physical kind of practice.
Yeah, I came to massage therapy after, um, doing the as professional dancer from just after high school until around like 35, and then had this higher ed journey where I got my MFA, and then was working at a university for 5 years. And towards the end of that, I started doing for I mean some healing um with myself, which kind of, and my partner is a massage therapist, and so that all kind of culminated and came together into really wanting to engage in healing practices across, like we're saying, across like many sort of levels and layers.
Mhm,
uh, because what I was doing um wasn't making me happy.
mhm,
Wasn't I got sober, and through that sobriety, sober from alcohol, and through that really addressed a lot of like deeper issues, and that was mixed in with a lot of like body trauma from being a dancer, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, and just like reflection. because I'm still making work through this entire thing, like reflection on how much stress and um, intensity I put on my body for so long. Um, and then um, kind of hitting a bottom and then realizing through the sort of healing of myself that I wanted to continue to do that through performance, through just my general day to day, like how I live, my daily job, and so going to massage therapy school and now being engaged in massage therapy, there's all of this knowledge from that my experience and also just being a dancer and like having that embodied knowledge for so long. I mean, I started dancing when I was 4, so like it goes all the way back. I mean, formally at 4, right? I was probably bopping around before then. Um, and so yeah, and I mean, I could rattle on and on about this. Like when I was doing this room as a body, was working with a lot of queer theory, and kind of extracted the horizon as this sort of material to work with. And the body on the horizon, as I was going through this healing process, was like this sort of star, this like guiding star, this remembrance that we are transmuting and transforming and changing, and that there is a relationship that we can have to that, and there's ways that we can sort of really sculpt and mold that in intentional ways. Um, yeah, yeah,
That makes me think about something about what you said, like the moment where you're um recognizing like physical trauma, emotional trauma, and then in this time of like kind of reflection, it seems like you did a lot of reaching out into types of education for yourself. And I think that's um, like a kind of fascinating impulse that I think not everyone would initially seek. So you talked about like even looking at like queer theory or like going into higher education at this time that uh, you're having an awareness of the types of pain you're experiencing. Um, does that sound like what that was?
yeah. Education. That's so interesting. Yeah, I think yeah, that's such an interesting framing of it. Yeah, it was wanting to kind of utilize again, like I started dancing professionally right after high school, and so I didn't do the sort of like this nice, I mean, say what you will about the educational system in America, and I'm fully, there's tons of problems.
I've got
But there's
lots to say
something,
about
yeah,
it.
I bet you do. There's something to be said though of this progression, like at that age into a collegiate sort of level. And I didn't do that. And so once my career, started to change and my desires inside of it changed, I wanted to be able to kind of utilize my lived experience. And the sort of MFA is kind of, or at least the one that I did was geared in that sort of direction. And then as far as massage, yeah. Um, Yeah, it's so interesting that you framed it as like educating myself is what I'm reaching towards. I think for me, there's also it was just this deeper seeking. Yeah, I've always been that way too, like just like wanting the information. I have like this insatiable, I'm neurodivergent as well, so there's like this fixation on like learning, knowing, like knowledge. Um not in a sense of like accruing it, but like, oh, I'm getting this image of what is that? Oh, Jigglypuff. The eating of it like does the transforming, you know what I mean?
You're talking about Kirby. I think
Oh,
that's
Kirby.
like because Kirby absorbs it,
That's it. That's
changes, and then puts it back out. And I think you also do that moment really nicely too. I think really when we look at like the reason I know everything you've been educated in because you offer it back as a practice, like as you go and as you grow. Um, I think that's like really, again, yeah, it's not necessarily a hoarding of knowledge, which
Yeah.
is type. This is like a collection to give back.
Yeah, process,
Mhm.
transformation, transmutation, right? It's porous. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And how'd that bring you to your tarot practice? We could do tarot or astrology. I don't, are they linked? We could talk about them separately or together.
Yeah, I'll start with tarot. I got a deck of cards when I was 13 from my best friend Joey, who I'm still friends with, and I still have this deck. When I pretty much well, I moved to the US when I was 12 from England with my family. And pretty much starting then onwards, I was really interested in esoteric and like sort of mystic stuff. Uh,
Mhm.
as teenagers are usually want to do. And yeah, I got this deck. I was really obsessed with it. The craft came out.
I was about to say we are the weirdos, mister, when you said
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And yeah, I loved using them, and they kind of, stuck around in my life here and there. But then when I was going to grad school, I really sort of honed in focus around divination across the world throughout history in different cultures. And then that was kind of background information for learning about the tarot, and then sort of transmuting that into physical practices, which public arcana, which is what you mentioned earlier. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I just got really obsessed with divination, which, like the word divination kind of came in later, and it has more sort of like colonial Renaissance, like the divine kind of thing. I mean, before then it was kind of like fortune telling and was done in like, taverns or like back rooms or like on the edge of markets, and is a little more seedy than like sort of like, you know, um bright and shiny like that. Why am I talking about that? And
I
uh,
asked.
yeah, and why
And I
am I
do think divination should feel, I guess, for us, divination and astrology are not necessarily, doesn't have to be intertwined as much as something like tarot. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, yeah, no. And I remembered what I was going to say earlier too, which was the idea of divination, which is basically a chance operation. And in the East, in China, they think about divination as like what likes to happen in time with each other, whereas like the Western sort of conception of divination is like linear. You ask me a question and I there is like a fixed future and I can tell you what that future is, versus like the more Eastern approach, which is like atmospheric or dimensional. Like there is a certain sort of quality of time right now that, and when I pull cards in that quality of time, it has some sort of reflection to you and me, because we are here in this quality of time together.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
and so tying that into public arcana and remembering all of this that I was going to say is like that's that same thing that we were talking about too, which is like dimensionality and like thinking about the quality of the time versus the linear, like the body, look, the focal point, the body as the focal point, as like this spectacle. It's
Mm.
like, how do we use these practices that we know and like sort of inflate time and
Mhm.
a little bit more. And astrology similarly is, it's a timing technique. I was just talking about this the other day. That uh I think people think astrology is like, oh, people arbitrarily made connections between feelings and planets in the sky.
Right.
Um, but they are cycles, like these cycles of planets doing things has echoed throughout time, and then people were just observant of that thing, and
Right.
then that's how the meaning came out of it. The meaning was sort of it emerged out of it versus just sort of arbitrary choices. So again, it has to do with like time and space and sort of qualities of time frames. Like what part in the spiral are we in, and how does that echo throughout time? Um, and then that inherently affects everything within that time. And so that's why divination or fortune telling, or however you want to say it, comes in. Is like, well, how do I reflect at that through these like smaller fractals, like tarot or I Ching or astrology, or I mean geomancy. There's so many different types of uh,
And also the types kind of speak to um, who the person can kind of choose the craft that makes sense with their own nature. Like you're saying, like geomancy, or I love any kind of like scrying or anything have to do with water. Like that makes so much sense to me. Um, Maybe like fire types looks to flames. Like certain people gravitate towards certain ways of understanding, and that if you take that broadly, that that can mean a lot of things and a lot of systems. It can mean religions, it can mean like whatever makes sense uh in your like innate understanding. So I think that's like a really good point. I also think I'm curious, especially for the people who at home are skeptical of divination practices. Can you talk about what it means to use them as tools, maybe even for yourself, or is that something that changes day by day? Um, what does it mean to use these tools? How do you use them in a practical, air quotes, practical sense?
yeah. There's a couple of questions in there. I think the first part, like people that are skeptical of it, I think that there's maybe a little too much sort of, yeah, importance or like, definition on it, like especially, yeah, when we're thinking of divination or like magical practices, let's say, or like these reflections on sort of energetic or chance operations, or like trying to be aware of the unseen of life.
Mhm. I
Um,
see.
I think that, yeah, they're practices, right? They're things that we do, and we just kind of. I always think of like I talk about this in dance as well, but like a loose fist, like holding on to something with like soft hands, like so things can come in and out, and you're holding on to it, so you're supporting it, but you're not like gripping onto it, which I think is a hard concept, especially in the US, especially right now. Like everyone's
And
like gripping
talking
onto their beliefs, and yeah,
because that's how the world can come in and out of it, like through those cracks that you leave. It
but
doesn't mean you have to give this up.
yeah, yeah. Um, which again is like transmutation and movement. I use them all the time for everything. I use them for um, just reflection. How I've they're useful because they're images, and the subconscious, we work with images in the subconscious, which is why, marketing is the way that it is, and media right now, and how these images and these contexts um, affect us subliminally or like underneath. And we can sort of know and sense a lot through images. It doesn't have to be through words and speech. And so I think cards, especially as a solo practice, if you were to use them by yourself, I think they are really useful ways to reflect on our interiorities, especially if we are thinking or processing something that we haven't said out loud. I think when things remain in that sort of non-verbal, more sensational feeling space, and using a practice like tarot, there's a whole sort of exchange and conversation that can happen without employing the logical mind or having to vocalize something. And so I think it's useful for, I mean, you and I, as performers and you as a poet, like we work, that is our currency, right? It's like to work
Yeah.
in and out of that space, but some
It
people
made me
don't
think of
have those outlets.
how
Um,
much is lost when you try to put something to language. So much is left once it leaves your mouth because it can't be the full. We can't share full experiences through language only.
yeah. And so, yeah, that's how I generally use it as a reflective practice, especially in the morning, like not speaking in the morning and just getting coffee and looking at cards. Like there's this whole other way that the mind sort of wakes up and comes out of that dream space, which is kind of a nice continuation versus like being jolted into front of the brain stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
And I also like what you're talking about, how at this in this age you kind of have to have media literacy, ability to understand how news is communicated to us, how like facts about the world are presented to us. We have to like develop that knowledge to be able to interpret things like when we just step out the door, we're watching TV or we're watching the internet or listening to the radio or talking to other people. You're talking about like this idea of developing symbolic literacy, or not even symbolic, but just like how do we interpret something that's maybe not as concrete? Can you develop a practice of recognizing these kind of uh, recurring symbols or totems, and like how do they um, what do they mean for you when you come to terms or come to face with these things? I think that's like a neat way to put it.
yeah, and it's occurring to me now, like this correlation between that and like visual marketing. Like I was just thinking of the Brat marketing, the Charlie XCX. Um, I was so fascinated with that. I have like one of my like side hobbies is just like really like following cultural lines.
Yeah.
Even dumb shit like feuds or like context that like artists get put in that sort of hyper visible like big fame sort of way. Um, and and incidentally, I like the album as well. But her just how that image kept showing up, and then when it affected the presidential election, like when that whole like Kamala is brat thing happened, I was like, holy fuck, like, and just with that ugly color and the pixelated font, like it was just that repeated, and it to see how it like seamlessly like flowed into like American politics, it was like
Yes.
that just there is we are already so fluent in the currency of images and how those images move and represent different things and then contextually reference other things, and the contextualization just continues to like fractal out. um
I
and
was
yeah.
I had a long conversation with Jimmy about this the other day. I was talking about how um, what's happening a lot with that, how fast things move, especially online. The the actual meaning of a the actual meaning of something is being outpaced by the cultural meaning of it. So things which is how something uh like Trump can happen because like what he symbolized culturally with when he did like when he was like, oh, he talks like somebody who speaks like a everyday person, and like he says it like it is. All these are traits that we like as a public associated with like these like blue collar people. So when he's culturally signifying these things, he doesn't have to actually have that like in real life have that meaning because the culture of it weighs more. If you have enough signifiers, that counts instead of like in actuality. So even though he's this like hyper rich person who in actuality has done nothing for this culture, he's signaling this culture. So it's and in this society that has more weight. So thinking about, I love talking about like signal and signified, like I love that shit. But I wish I had a good example, but unfortunately, like I mean, he knows how to do it. I don't even think he knows how to do it, but I think he just is a very good example of how that can happen.
Mhm.
I definitely don't want to end on that. So I want to end.
Uh,
Uh,
this is kind of related, but a little bit different. But I kept thinking of it was the Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, like finger, like the
yeah,
holding the holding space. That whole thing where like for the queer people in that room, which was Cynthia Erivo and I can't remember the interviewer's name.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
Yeah. What would the exchange that was trying to happen or that I read was like there was she right, queer media, right? She was like defying gravity actually is being signaled as this like queer sort of like anthem or this queer story, and that it's like there's like this new sort of reflection on that, and I think
yeah,
that's what Cynthia Erivo was picking up on, and as like a really sort of grounded queer woman was like had these like hopes that her being a queer person would have these like overtones or undertones in the thing. Um, but then like I heard people talking about it in podcasts and stuff like that, and they were saying how like no one really it was funny and like no one really knew what was happening and like then when they were asked about it again, Ariana Grande was like, "Yeah, I don't really know what was happening." And I was like, "Really? Like was it that transparent?" I mean,
well, something weird about that moment is that like, and I guess this is probably a cultural thing where I think now everyone, I don't know. I'll say that defying gravity does have, there's ways that you can read into defying gravity through a queer lens, through a like person of color lens, like a black lens. There's like it has all these interesting layers. Um, and I thought it was really weird that to acknowledge that was like gauche or tacky or like strange, because I was like, it is there. Why is it bad to acknowledge that? And I think maybe the only reason I think people were feeling hesitant to do that is that it would be a closed reading of the song as opposed to leaving it um, open. But I mean, who loves Wicked way before that movie came out was queer people. So why are we acting like it didn't have that resonance?
and it's
Uh,
a press tour. Like, so of course they're going to be forced into these contexts and these, not forced, but like, you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
that press tour is a machine. Like, and even though it's queer media, like there's this like thing that it has to do or these bullet points that it has to kind of like check because of the sort of greater media system. But yeah, totally. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, what a strange world we live in.
Also, side note, the Galinda Elphaba thing, it's Leo Aquarius. Um,
And I talked about this. So me and Jimmy were like, I'm a Scorpio and Jimmy's a Aries. This for the people who don't know. And I was saying that I think actually Aries would be Elphaba because like when she's confronted with a system she can't uh work with, she's gonna rather want to like just burn it down. Whereas Scorpio would confront it and adapt, uh, and like just change the goalpost.
Mhm.
But I love conversations like that with you. But but let's see. Do you want to draw one more card to close us out?
Yeah, this happened so quickly. Hold on.
I know.
All right, we're gonna do tell me when.
Stop.
It's the 10 of wands.
Okay, work. So
You
what
got
does
the
that
9 and then the 10.
nice. So
10.
that's completion, right? Or like that's
Yeah, and the thing about the 10 of wands in the completion card, it shows that it's not complete, which just means like these fires that burn within us like are, it's like especially around creativity and expression, right? It's like the work is never done. It's always another version or another cycle.
or that's kind of perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Well, on that note, thanks so much for talking with us. I know people will get a great sense of you from this conversation and also just get some kind of cool knowledge to go about their day with. So thank you for sharing with us.
So awesome to talk to you. Thank you so much.